now we are coming to the discussion section in which our early childhood education experts will come together and discuss the challenges in implementing early STEM in Hong Kong. We are honored to have Professor Allan Yuen to chair the section and to join Professor Marilyn and Professor Chen for the discussion.
Professor Allan Yuen is the president of Yu Chong College of Early Childhood Education. Prior to joining the college, Professor Yuen served the University of Hong Kong for 22 years and took up various leadership positions in the Faculty of Education, such as Associate Dean, Head of Division, Center Director, and Program Director. He supervised more than 30 doctoral students or postdoctoral fellows. He has a genuine commitment in education and educational research. And his research interests include educational change and innovation, educational evaluation, teacher education, science of learning, and educational technology. Professor Yuen has a good track record of leading international as well as local research projects supported by various funding bodies. He publishes widely in his research areas and has produced more than 300 academic publications, including books, journal articles, book chapters, conference papers, and research projects and research reports. Professor Allan Yuen, Professor Fleer, and Professor Chen, the stage is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? All right, so now I think that I would just want to start with my very, very grateful heart that to extend my thanks to our two keynote speakers, Professor Marilyn Fleer and also Professor Jie-Qi Chen. Now, I think that most of you would agree with me that it is indeed a very eye-opening presentation. So that's why now we have about, I don't know whether, according to the time, we have about 15 minutes for discussion. So then I would like to, because I already prepared some areas, then we can start our discussion. In particular, then when I look at all this kind of response from the audience, and this is already start up, some kind of discussion. So then I would just start with the very first question. Then now, the first question is that I would like to talk about Hong Kong first. Now, in Hong Kong, parents in Hong Kong, they believe giving their children a head start is the key success. So that's why there's a very popular phrase called win at the starting line. All right. So this is a kind of a very popular in Hong Kong. I don't know whether you're in Australia or in the US, they have a similar thing, but then there's among Asian, parents, and they have that kind of, they have a strong belief that all the kids must win a place. First of all, in a lit kindergarten, and then learn many, many, many things. Of course, including STEM. All right, so this is the, the background. Then I would like to ask two of you, the question is about how early should we start introducing STEM education to preschoolers? How early? Now, of course, you will ask the parent then with the win at the starting point, then they will have their own idea. If you ask a parent on the street, then they'll give you some idea about that. Now, I just want to hear from you, how early, if they ask you a question. Shall we just start with Professor Fleer?
Yes, what a beautiful question. And my response is that babies begin acting and thinking scientifically. But I think the challenge is recognizing that, as Professor Chen said, how do you make that visible to others so that they can see that children are wondering and being curious? And so it's such an important area. And I think that if we can nurture it from babies onwards by families and educators, making, as Professor Chen said, making it visible so that it can be, I think there's two parts to it. One is so that families can recognize that a child who initiates a gesture as an infant to explore their world is acting scientifically. And what we do as educators or as families is create the conditions to do that systematically, so that the child, so that's the second part, the child or the infant can begin to think with STEM lenses, because they have a consciousness of a process or a consciousness consciously using a concept. So the infant who's sitting in the high chair and drops things on the floor is seeing there's a pattern to this, and the educator or the parent says, oh, I noticed that this is happening, and can start to introduce very early on words like gravity, and it's then what we're doing around the child is creating the story in relation to their early curiosities, so that we continue that and open it up. So for me, it's begin early.
Okay. What about Professor Chen?
I would agree with Professor Fleer. It starts from birth. Then, of course, the first question is, how do you define STEM learning? And STEM learning, I think in my mind, is a part of a life. And life is STEM learning. Okay, and I just published a book. It's called the Precursor Concept, another word in mathematics, which is talking about math from birth. And when children come to mother's womb, the first thing they feel is the sensation of cold outside, okay? And the cold and the warm, hard and the soft, diaper, sweat and the dry, and eat and the full and empty stomach. All these are attributes. Attributes is the basic concept of math and the science. So as Professor Fleer talked about, as adults, keep talking with children. When the child, even though they are only in the receptive understanding stage, they are not able to express themselves yet, do not stop talking, okay? And language is the way to help us to articulate our thinking, consolidate our concept. That's one thing I want to say. Second thing is that, and why, and we're thinking start birth, but really and provide rich experience rather than those paper pencil work and the really and the one way of solving problem, because we all know that in the 21st century and our training and our work do not always match one-to-one correspondence. A few years ago, I was in China and attending a conference, and they were talking about Google and Microsoft. They said, well, now we have the simultaneous translation, but in fact, and now and this job is going to be out because, and we have a computer, artificial intelligence, they were doing such a better job. Today, I was reading an article, they talk about artificial intelligence now writing a poem, writing an essay. Oh my goodness. So what are we going to do with our human being? So what we need is developing the ability. That ability is exposed to children to the wide variety of things and give them an opportunity to make mistakes, to explore, and to develop themselves.
All right, thank you very much. I mean, as you know that education, I would say bracket, quote unquote education is a big business in Hong Kong. They spend a lot of money, all parents, then they would like to spend a lot of money to just enable their kids to be a very successful runner. So that's why if you think that we started as early as we can, just start as a baby, then of course, some business mind, they will think about, wow, whether we can start with some kind of STEM kids in particular for baby. Now we have no idea about baby learns STEM. we have only about, for example, with the Hong Kong, we have the jump starters started from the K2, but then I think that is another idea that we can think about. If we can start from baby, then we can think about the STEM. Now, I have a second area or second question we'd like to discuss. In particular, indeed, I can see, some of those participants has already raised that kind of question. It's about teaching STEM. Now, of course, some participants already raised the issue about STEM is a very transdisciplinary area. Now, in particular in kindergarten or in preschool kids, then do you think that teachers need some kind of efficacy so that they can teach STEM? Or do they need some special kind of content? Now, I think some audience already asked a question. Most kindergarten teachers, they do not have any basic idea about science, right? Usually then they are not mathematicians, they are not scientists. So that then whether they can teach STEM is a question. Now, I just want to, Dr. Brad Chen also raised as a kind of slogan, everyone can teach STEM. This is his slogan. Then I just wanted to comment on this, in particular, how we can help a teacher, in particular, to facing this kind of transdisciplinary area, to equip them, to give them more idea about teaching STEM at kindergarten. Who would like to go first?
You're pointing to me. Okay, I think this is an incredibly important question, and I think that if we're thinking about 21st century skills, and we're thinking also about families who want to win at the starting line, then and this is a global issue. I think I'm sure Professor Chen would agree with me. It's a global issue because there has been, and Professor Chen pointed to it when he was showing the focus on the girl and having a female character in the story as well as part of the Jump Starter program and the storybook. When we look at the literature globally, we see that girls have felt that STEM is not for them. And because they see it as not for them early on, even in our work, we've been able to show that children in a play world and children outside of a play world, there's a very different interactional pattern, and the girls still miss out. Even now, right now, when people are so aware, the boys are there using the resources and girls are hanging back. And when we take that forward and we say, if as a 3-year-old or as a 4-year-old or as a 6-year-old, you gradually start to feel as a girl, STEM is not for me, and then you become an early childhood teacher and you haven't built the confidence and the competence in STEM over time and seen it as something that you can do, we're dealing with more than knowledge. We're actually dealing with a belief about our knowledge. And to me, that's the part that's been missing in a lot of the models of teaching STEM, because it's about how to support teachers to recognize the STEM knowledge that they do have, because, and the example I often think about, and this is a very Australian example, and it'd be interesting to know what the equivalent would be in Hong Kong and maybe Chicago, but early research that we did in Australia when I was part of a team looked at women and their knowledge of STEM. And they all said, I don't know anything about STEM. And these were female teachers in elementary schools and in preschools. And so we don't know anything about it. We don't feel confident. And then when they participated in professional learning, like the community of practice, they started to realize they had a lot of knowledge about chemistry and cooking. They had a lot of knowledge about STEM in gardening. They had a lot of knowledge in Australia about how to assemble packaged furniture, because that's a big thing here, you know, looking at designs and being able to put things together and use tools. So, but they didn't believe that they had. And so we worked on that part first. And for me, sometimes it's about, this is the first barrier to recognize actually what is it that you do know. And then when you say, well, actually, I do know something, I know that over time I've been taught to believe that this is not for me, but now I do know things. And so the professional learning that's needed to turn this around is to begin there. But also at the same time for us as a community, a global community, to do just like the Jockey Club's doing with those beautiful books. You know, you start to have the female character being the scientist, being the engineer, and that the girls are saying that's for me. And then the teachers are saying, okay, can we give more experiences or make sure the girls get the same experiences as the boys so that they don't end up over time feeling that's not for them and not building the knowledge and the confidence that they need later on to do things and make decisions. It's a really important aspect. So to me, that's just one response, but I'm sure Professor Chen has some ideas about how do we deal with this confidence or efficacy around STEM as teachers.
Well, you said so well, so and I 100% agree with and what our Professor Fleer just said. I think, again, the first thing is to define what is STEM for adults. And I think and Professor Fleer said so well, and that, and if we think about and come up with a formula and doing the rocket science, and the early childhood teachers, and we're not at that level, but we are explorer, and we are a multitask and the thinker and the doer, and we are a logic thinker, and we're exploring many things to solve the problem on a daily basis. Okay, so in that sense, you are a scientist, you are a mathematician, and that's like so much what and Professor Fleer said, building on the strengths and look at access. Not what you cannot do, but what you can do. And the attitudes is as important, if not more so, than knowledge. Okay, that's what. Having said that, yes, there is a set of knowledge, content-specific knowledge. We talk about STEM is transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary. Each area does have its own big ideas. It is not just mush wish and a bunch of soup. It is a salad. There is a tomato. There is and cucumbers, and they have their own spectral nature. And learn about those big ideas as important and beginning. And the third thing I want to emphasize is that learning, and if you choose the career to be teacher, you will never stop learning. Professional development is a lifelong process. When I was in graduate school, I know nothing about infant development. It was just not there. And the last 20 years in infant development, cognition infants are just booming. So we have to learn, okay? Learning, and I think Dr. Chen used the term and the community practice. We talk about the professional learning communities, okay? And it's very important that we learn with each other and from each other. No one knows everything. And if we all face reality, we all make mistakes. And if I make mistakes, so what? Next time I'm better, okay? With that attitude, we can all become better STEM teachers.
And I so agree. And Professor Chen, would you also agree then that it's important to build this knowledge? Because, you know, if we think about one STEM concept, one science concept, or one engineering principle, and learn about that key big idea, and then try it out with the teaching. And then the next year or the next time you do a unit or a project, you learn another concept. So to take it step by step and build that knowledge base and not be frightened to try. I agree.
I like that, excellent point, because there are so many things and no one can learn everything at the same time. Let's focus on one at a time. Once you master that, you develop that kind of confidence, and then you can build on. And then in fact, in many ways, they are connected anyway.
Okay. So then it seems then you bring out that idea that the learning STEM is a knowledge building process. We started with this and that, and then we just build up this. Now, I just want to start, to link this discussion to a classical concept from Lee Shulman. You know, Lee Shulman just talk about content knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and then just eventually they talk about PCK, pedagogical content knowledge. So that's why that is another question, that whether in teaching early STEM, in that kind of teacher training, do we have that kind of PCK, pedagogical content knowledge in early STEM? Now, of course, we are not going to discuss here, but then I just want to raise this. So then perhaps we can just think about this kind of thing, whether this is content, pedagogy, or other thing that we can think about further. Now, I just want to have another area of discussion. I realize the time, but then I would like to think that this will be the last question that we can start. Now, I would like to talk about cultural differences. Now, I can see the situation in Australia, in the US, is a very multicultural society. So then even within a classroom, then you can see there are so many different ethnic groups within that. Now, this is not exactly the situation in Hong Kong. Comparatively, Hong Kong has a very homogeneous culture. Within the same class, even though that we have sometimes some other, ethnic students, but most classroom, they are very homogeneous. Now, I just want you, both of you, to share a little bit about in particular about the cultural differences. I understand this is a very big question, but then you just, have a little kind of discussion with that. So with your sharing, the situation in Australia and also the situation in the US, any particular thing that you can share with us about the early STEM, the cultural differences in early STEM?
This is, it is, you're absolutely right, Professor Yuen, that it's a very big question, and we probably just only touch the surface of it, but just 2 quick points.
Yep.
One is that we have always talked about science, and not recognized we're talking about Western science. And so the first thing is about how is this knowledge developed, from which cultural community has it come from? So that's the big ideas. And then what does that then mean? So the second point, for an early childhood teacher who comes from a non-Western science tradition, in Australian and Indigenous educator, for instance. And even in the US, I've read fantastic studies of culturally diverse communities that where when they do their teacher education and they learn the concepts in STEM, they actually feel culturally violated, because particularly in the northern, the North American context, culturally violated because they've learned that the world works in a particular way, and then they have to teach the Western way and not even say that it's a Western way of doing things. And this causes violence in the person. And so many people have looked at how do you create culturally responsive curriculum, and also then what does that mean? So in Australia, we're very cognizant of the different knowledge forms. And what we say is that there are different ways to look at the world, and we have to value all of them, because they can actually help solve really big problems like climate change and some of the big worldwide things if we have other ways of looking at the problem. So that comes back to Professor Chen's comment that it's actually multiple ways of solving problems, not one right pathway, but actually recognizing that Western science can give us certain bits of knowledge, and after that it's difficult. and other forms of knowledge also can cause some challenges, but it's recognizing that these have to be respected because they become part of a person's worldview. And that really matters when we're talking about very young children.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, but I know we're short of time, so I'll give over to Professor Chen.
Okay, Professor Chen.
Well, build on Professor Fleer's point, and there's multiple way of thinking, learning, representing, and communicating and doing. And I think, I emphasize a lot about language. And then really when I say language, I did emphasize the verbal communication. But, and that you also, when you introduce, and myself, I worked with Howard Gardner for so many years, and a really strong believer in multiple way of thinking and the learning. So, and the young children, when in a different culture, and they came to the American society which speaks English, and they may not have that language capacity yet, but do not stop there, keep talking and ask them. That's why we talk about the drawing and the graphing and even acting out, like Professor Fleer's example, and teachers dancing and children's dancing, acting out of the stories. That's another way of representing. So I think in our culture in Hong Kong, even though everybody speaks Cantonese, everybody is and Chinese, but still they are different in other ways. So we emphasize that is another way of a culture and a different intelligence, a different way of expressing themselves. And we need to value all of that.
Yes, of course. I mean, you can define culture as different levels. That's different level of culture. It's not limited to ethnic differences. It's all about different things because culture is everything. So then you can see that there will be different kind of culture. Now, I really enjoy this kind of discussion. If I can more time, if another hour, I think that we can go and have more and more discussion about most of the important questions in early STEM education. But then I think that I have to conclude the whole the session. I just want to conclude the whole session that I just want every one of you to share, to join me to just show our appreciation to our two keynote speakers, Professor Fleer and also Professor Chen. Thank you very much. Of course, I mean, you cannot see them, they just, a big hand and big applause. But then, but my heartfelt thanks to two of you. So thank you very much. And I'll hand over the time to, because they are now just, asking me to complete it as soon as possible. And then I can, Jennifer or Vivian, and who will be?
Yes.
Vivian or Jenny?
Thank you.
Jenny, okay.
Thank you, Professor Yuen, Professor Fleer, and Professor Chen for such a fruitful discussion. So we have a question from the audiences for Professor Fleer and Professor Chen. So you highly recommend using children's books to start the STEM exploration. So can you give us some tips of choosing books for STEM exploration? What are some tips you can give to parents and teachers? And I think it would be wonderful if Professor Fleer and Professor Chen can give us 2 tips each. Thank you very much.
Okay, very quickly. Selecting a story which is enjoyable. So first of all, everybody wants to read it and experience the story. And then a story that allows you to build empathy for the characters. So you want to, the hero in the story, the cow that we saw, she's a fantastic scientist, so I want to be like her, or I want to help her. So building that empathy, and when she has a problem, I want to help solve it. And the third thing is that it's the book lends itself to STEM exploration. So the problem arises that can be solved. So it lends itself to that, and it's not just a very short factual book. It's actually a dramatic and exciting book.
Thank you.
Well, and Professor Fleer said so well, and I will just add 2 things. One is developmentally appropriate, right? And not all the book is appropriate for your age of child. And secondly, is really good design and picture. Some pictures, some books is too, computer generated and kind of not very beautiful picture.
Well, thank you all so much, Professor Fleer, Professor Chen, and Professor Allan, Yuen, for all of your sharing. And we would like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to all of you, and also for Dr. Brad Chen for bringing us a fruitful Saturday morning. So to mark this memorable moment, shall we take a group photo together? So everyone, including our organizing committees, please switch on your cameras and we will take a group photo on Zoom. So if everyone's ready.
Nearly. Kelly's not ready. Oh, there she is. You just did your hair, Kelly.
Okay, so I'm gonna count from 1 to 3, and then we can take this wonderful group picture. 1, 2, 3, cheers. Okay.
Okay, so thanks again to all the distinguished guests and speakers for joining us this morning and sharing with us so much valuable experiences and insights. We appreciate your time very much. And thank you all the participants who attended this conference. Let's work together and let early childhood STEM education blooms.
Yes, couldn't agree more. So in the meantime, we would like to hear from you. It would be very kind if you can let us know your feedback regarding the conference this morning. You may simply scan the QR code on the screen and spend a minute filling out the feedback form. Your comments help us to achieve more. So for those who complete the post-event questionnaire, will be awarded with an event certificate. And we will now take a lunch break. Please join us again at 1:30 p.m. for the Early STEM Community Seminar. And also please note that the seminar will be conducted in Cantonese only. And we have invited 4 professionals from different areas, including language development, social emotional, physical development, and a scientist working in a lab. You may attend via the Zoom link sent to you earlier. And please feel free to invite your friends to join us if they are interested.
So before we leave the Zoom, please be aware that we will be offering a certificate to our attendees. You will be redirected to a website which will be collecting your information for the certificate immediately after the Zoom is finished. If you would like to receive the attendance cert, please complete the form with your printed name and the valid email address that we can send the certificate through. If you have any further queries, please do not hesitate to contact us. You can find our contact information on the slides. See you at 1:30 p.m. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was
Thank you.
fabulous. Congratulations. Bye-bye.